Hi, my name is Anastasia, if we haven't met each other yet, and every time I make a project, a knitted project, I make a swatch for it. We all know how important it is to make a swatch. It helps to avoid so much mistakes, to predict the future of a project and if our work will be worth it. But nevertheless, the knitting community doesn't like to make swatches. I heard a million times that people avoid making knitted swatches for their projects. And I was one of those people. I used to hate making the swatches for my project. It wasn't fun at all. It was the least fun part of the whole project. Sometimes I didn't make them at all. And when I made them, I just made this little tiny square with like a few stitches, maybe a line, and go with it because it's better than nothing. But you know what? I actually enjoy making swatches right now. I know it is kind of a controversial opinion, but I do. I changed a lot of things in my attitude towards swatches, and I think it kind of worked because now it's actually fun and cool for me to make swatches. But let's start with the concrete things that I do to make my swatch knitting more fun. First of all, I try to make my swatches pretty. I don't just make this long string of some pearls and knits, and I'm guilty of it in the past, but now I do pretty swatches. What does it mean? First of all, I decided to make a border, a garter stitch border in each of my swatches. This garter stitch border not only makes my swatches more fun, but it makes them lay flat. You know, the edges don't curl. It is much more easy to measure in width and in height, and I can for sure tell if I'm hitting the gauge. In the past, I used to think that I'm hitting the gauge, but I actually was not hitting the gauge because my swatch was hard to measure and it wasn't laying flat. Also, know how the edge knits tend to be bigger than all of the others? Well, there is no such problem when you make a border. All of the stitches are the same. And you can make like a border you like. You can choose your own style of your swatches. The garter stitch is just easy and it works for me. So I chose that one. Also, if you're making a sweater with a pattern like cables, make a sample of those. Make a sample of your pattern. This is what I did here, and it is a fun part of my swatch collection. Also, block your swatches. It is not a long process. It is very fast. I just make them wet, squish them a little, add a little bit of a conditioner, and squish it with a conditioner, rinse it all out, and lay it flat to dry. First of all, you will know if the knitted fabric changes after you block it. Second of all, it makes it lay flat and it makes it look pretty. The second thing I do is make a collection out of your swatches. Find a place where you will store all of your swatches and treat it like a collection. You see, I have a board right here. I made it all by myself. I even have a video where I make this board. I'll link it somewhere in the corner. But I made a board on which I hang all of my swatches. Now I'm motivated to fill this interior piece of mine, and I can do that only by knitting more swatches. So every time I make a swatch, I not only test the gauge and the knitted fabric, I make something for my interior piece and for my collection. I don't know actually if it works for everybody, but it works for me and it does something for my motivation. I used to have a book to store all of my samples, but for me it didn't really work. It can work for people who are like into scrapbooking, into journaling, but for me the more visual, everyday scene interior piece works better. I'm sure there are other ways to make a collection of it. If you have ideas, leave them in the comments. The third thing I do is to test multiple things in one swatch. I'm slowly taking apart my knitting board. Well, that is not the prettiest sample of mine. The garter stitch border is too small. I make mistakes even when I make swatches, but it's okay, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that I tested a lot of things in this one swatch. I tested two colors, as you can see. I tested it with mohair and without mohair, and I also tested different needle sizes. It is not that visible on the camera. And I tested 1 strand and 2 strands of the yarn, of the wool yarn. How much the label does. Yes, I actually have 2 strands of wool, 1 strand of wool and mohair. So much information in this little piece of fabric. You can even test totally different yarns. It sounds funky, but it is pretty. It is fun and it gives you a lot of information. Like if you do not want to make a large sample like that for just one type of yarn, you can get like 2 completely different yarns, one super fluffy and one super not fluffy, and knit them together and see what it does for you, because it makes a fun swatch, it makes it multifunctional, is that word, and it is a good addition to your collection. You may even like it so much to use it in your project. I haven't tried it yet, but I will. When I have a fun yarn, I will totally make a swatch like that. My fourth point is store all the information about your swatches. If you use some kind of a scrapbook to store it, you can just write down all the information about the swatch. But if you use a board like me, you can add a label to it where you put all your information. This is a large label because I tested a lot of things in this one swatch, but all of my other swatches have like this small piece of paper where I put down all of the important information about this swatch. So I write down the yarn type, number of threads. The most important thing is the needle size, because I always forget what needle size I used. And if you do that, you can use one swatch more than once. If you decide to use the yarn you want to use one more time, maybe in different color, you can just take your old swatch and you do not have to make another one. You already know your gauge. The gauge can differ even for one yarn and different colors of this yarn, but you can compare the strands, and if you see that they are identical, everything will be okay. And if you see some differences, maybe it is better to make another swatch. But most of the times, different colors of one yarn are like the same fabric-wise. My fifth point is to share your swatches with your friends, even non-knitters. I know knitters will be interested in swatches, but even my friends who do not knit, and this is most of my friends, they like touching different swatches, different types of yarn, different types of fabric. They see my board, they think I'm crazy, but then when they touch the samples I have, it is so entertaining for them, and it is entertaining for me to show off something that I made. It is a fun little collection, and if a person comes to your house, they will notice it if it's like on the visible place, and they always ask me about it, and I have an excuse to talk about my knitting. Every time they leave, I have like this new burst of motivation to make my board even more interesting for the next time they come. I don't know what's up with me, but I just have some energy to make more swatches, and it's fun again for me. My sixth point is to treat it like part of a project, because it is part of a project. It's a part that determines the whole result. If you make a swatch, you can be sure that it will fit you the way you want it to fit you. A swatch before making a garment can make or break your project. Maybe I am dramatic, but I fully believe it. Also, if you or the person you making the garment for is allergic, you can test it. Of course, you can like rub it against your skin, but if you hold it in your hands for some time, even when you just make a swatch, you can really understand how your body reacts to this fabric. I made a sweater for my boyfriend, I knitted it, and I wanted to put mohair in it. And my boyfriend is sometimes allergic, for example, to cats and dogs, and turned out he's allergic to mohair too. And we found out in the beginning of the project, and it could have been seen while I was making the sample, but I was trying to be sneaky and didn't want him to see the sample. But I made 4 samples. You can see it is the blue ones on my wall. Imagine how much difference it makes when you just wing it and think that this would work or this would work, and when you have all the samples of different fabrics in front of you. I think this testing of different fabrics did a lot to this project and to this sweater. It just allowed me to make it just as I think it should be. Do you make swatches? Please tell me in the comments, how do you make swatches? Do you make a border? Do you care if they are pretty? Do you have a collection of some sort? I'm very interested in all of that. I read all the comments, so please share your opinion. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this video helped you somehow. I hope it made this sample knitting more fun for you, but I'll see you next time. Goodbye.